Hi everyone, Uncle Nacki here. Today I'm going to talk about some basics in stamp collecting and also how to remove the newer type self-adhesive stamps off of envelopes so you can properly mount them either into an album or in a stock page or even in an envelope designed for stamps. As some of you may know, before the self-adhesive stamps, when you used to have to lick the stamps to stick them on the envelope, those particular stamps can actually be soaked in room temperature water for 10 or 15 minutes or so, and the stamp will actually release from the paper, from the envelope. One tip when doing that, if you have any stamps that are on, say, Christmas type cards or other types of holidays where the envelope is a dark red or a dark green, any of those dark colors of paper, you want to try to keep those stamps out of the batch that you're soaking, because those colors will actually leave the envelope and get into your water, and it'll actually tint the rest of the stamps that are soaking. So any of the stamp backgrounds that were white, if you have like a stamp in there with the red paper, you'll end up having a bunch of red stamps, and then those are, really don't carry any value after that. They're considered damaged stamps. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind when soaking stamps in water. Just soak the ones that are on the white envelopes. Any of the other colors, you want to keep those to the side. Maybe do a couple at a time, but keep the colors together. If you have any stamps that are of value, I would say, you're better off probably not even soaking them off the paper, just because usually the color of the paper, the ink, from the paper, it kind of like seeps into the paper of the stamp. So just don't really recommend it. But nowadays they use stamps that are self-adhesive, so you just kind of peel them right off and stick them to whatever you're mailing. And a quick, easy way to tell which you have, whether it's a self-adhesive stamp or the type that you'd have to lick, is by looking at the perforations around the stamp. If you look at the one on like this particular stamp here, they're nice and smooth, going around the inside and the outside of the humps. Those are the perforations. They're measured by how many would be in like an inch. On this stamp here, if you look closer, you can see they're kind of like all over the place. It looks like they were torn apart, and it's because they were part of a sheet, and you'd actually have to bend the sheet and tear the stamps off the sheet. With these, they're already pre-cut. You just peel them right off, of the stamp booklet or, the sheet that you have, and just stick it to the envelope. So this is the type of stamps here that you would want to soak in water. And then you'd want to like dry them on a clean paper towel, and probably put another paper towel on top, and something with some kind of weight, like a old phone book or something like that. And what that will do is prevent the stamp from curling while it dries. It'll keep it nice and smooth and straight, so it will fit nicely into an album. With this self-adhesive stamps, you don't really have to worry about that, because it's kind of a process that you have to do one at a time. It's a longer process. It's nothing really, unfortunately, simple, but it is what it is. It could be why the stamp collecting has kind of died down over the years. anybody looking to get into stamp collecting, I highly recommend it, just because the market is way down. I don't think it can get any worse, and it can only get better. So at some point in history and time, things will turn around, and people will start to stamp collect again. Right now you can get some really nice stamps out there at a really low price. But if you're just starting out, I recommend just collecting the stamps you get right off of envelopes you get in the mail. It's kind of like almost like starting a collection for free. So they come in all different types. A stamp like this, John F. Kennedy. This stamp here is considered a commemorative stamp. These are stamps that are usually issued, based on a topic or, like a certain anniversary or, different states, the birds and flowers, or, they all have some sort of a special meaning. And, they're usually, released for a short period of time, and then, they go on to something else. They have other stamps, which are a little more basic. These are called, or considered, definitive stamps. These stamps here, they're a lot more common, such as this one here, the Liberty Bell. Usually you get a ton of stamps like this in your collection because it's a more common stamp, and they sell them for a longer period of time. Another one would be like a flag stamp, same idea. They sell them for a long period of time in a booklet form, and everybody just uses these because they're just more easy to get. The other ones you have to go to the post office. You have to request them. If you don't request anything special, you're gonna you get handed a booklet of flag stamps or flower stamps, or a Liberty Bell, something very basic, Statue of Liberty even. And then you also have other stamps during the holidays, such as Christmas. Christmas stamps kind of fall in the middle of the commemorative and the definitive stamps. They're still very common, such as these, but they're not considered a commemorative stamp, unfortunately. But what's nice about some of these definitive type stamps and Christmas stamps, they offer them in different ways, such as booklet form, sheet form. Some of them are sold out of vending machines. So they're actually different stamps, even though they may look exactly the same, or they may have the same picture on them. Like this one here, it's got the top doesn't have any perforations. And that just means that this was, came out of a booklet of stamps, and that flat edge was the edge of the booklet. Then you have other stamps that may look like this, but has the perforations all the way around. That particular stamp could have come out of a sheet. And then you have other stamps where have a flat edge on the top and the bottom, and that would be, a stamp that came from a coil roll. Let's see if this is a coil roll or not. Yeah, see, so like on this one here, it's flat on the top, flat on the bottom. You got the perforations on the left and the right, meaning that this stamp came from a coil roll. Coil rolls, if you go to the post office, most of the ones that are available most commonly to the public usually have 100 stamps in a roll. Here's another commemorative type stamp. Most commemorative stamps, come in sheet form, so you're going to have perforations all the way around all four corners. And then you have other stamps, which are also considered commemoratives, that have a certain number of stamps in a particular series. These stamps here, I believe they're like the Hot Wheels type stamps. And, they made 10 different designs. for this particular release. You know, some stamps are just single design release. Some will come in designs of 4. Some are in 10 different designs. Some are 12. It all really depends on the topic of the stamp and how much effort that the post office puts into it. So, like I said, on some of the older stamps, such as these, if you look at the perforations, they're kind of, not pretty looking. You can tell they weren't cut by a machine, and that's normal. As long as they're not torn or anything missing or a little chunk missing, out of one of them, that's perfectly normal. But these types of stamps would be the stamps that you would soak in paper. And then, like I said, the newer type, you look at the perforations and they're nice and smooth. And these are the stamps that are self-adhesive stamps. It's a little more of a process to remove them, and I'm going to show you how. Couple things you can do, after you've taken care of the stamp. There's different types of supplies. This is one particular one. It's got a black background. It's it's got a clear. It's almost like a cellophane in the front, and what that does is it really makes the stamp stand out, because you'll be able to see the perforations with the black background. It'll look nice. It'll look nicer than the stamp looking like this. And then they have special stamp envelopes where you can put the stamps in them. It's made out of a material where the stamp is less likely to stick to it. So that's a little important also. One thing to keep in mind with the self-adhesive stamps, when you do remove these stamps from the paper, most of them do tend to keep their adhesive still stuck on the stamp. Some people have their ideas of what to do at that point. Some people will stick that stamp onto a piece of saran wrap and then cut the saran wrap around the stamp, and then put that into their stamp album. And I guess it's a good idea. Probably not one I would recommend, because if you're unsticking the stamp from the paper just to stick it onto a piece of cellophane, what's the difference? To me it's the same. So what I normally use, which may sound kind of odd to some of you, there's this air freshener spray. It's called Pure Citrus. Just comes in a regular aerosol can. This here, normally I can find this at Walmart for a couple bucks. It's very orangey smelling, so if you have somebody in your family that doesn't like the smell of oranges, may not be a good idea to try this indoors. You might want to do this maybe outside or something, or in a garage. There are other ways to remove these stamps from the paper, but they involve highly toxic chemicals, and I just don't recommend that. Especially if you're doing a large group of stamps, it won't be good for you to be breathing in those fumes. The one thing I can tell you about the Pure Citrus is, when you do use this, be careful where you're spraying it. If you were to spray this, and any of this was to get onto any type of plastic, it will actually eat away at the plastic. So you want to be very careful where you're spraying this. Normally, if I'm going to do it, I usually will put like just a regular brown paper bag down, which is actually what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to kind of adjust this to kind of fit underneath there, and this way any of the overspray gets onto the paper bag. It doesn't take a lot to make this work. What I do recommend is taking any of the excess paper off. You don't want to have 2 layers of paper, because what you're going to be doing is spraying this on the back side of the stamp and not on the front, because the front isn't sticky. It's the back side that's sticky. So you're basically saturating the paper that it's on to release the stamp. One other tool that you can use is called a stamp tong. And all they are just, this is what you would normally use to hold the stamp and view it without, having to touch it with your hands. This comes in handy, when removing the stamp from the paper, because you can kind of go to the edge, get underneath the paper, and it just kind of slowly peels right off. So let's give this a go. It's been many years since I've actually done this. I did it probably on one stamp just to see if it actually worked, and it worked surprisingly well. So it doesn't take a lot. Like I said, we're going to make sure we're actually hitting the back side of the stamp. Give it one little, okay, I guess it's an older can here. Okay, let me see if I can find myself another can. Be right back. Okay, I'm back with another can. Hopefully this one works better. I guess that was my first YouTube blooper. So here we go. Same type of can here. And like I said, it doesn't take a lot. Just one quick little spray. You want to make sure you get it on all the paper on the back side, and you can kind of see the outline of the stamp. And what that's kind of means is you're it's saturated through the paper. And once it's saturated through the paper, even if you don't have the stamp tongs, you can just peel right back like this, rolling the back paper right off the stamp. If you do have the stamp tongs, it just makes it easier to just grab the stamp and just slowly peel it off. If it doesn't feel like it's peeling off easily, you may have to just spray a little bit more. But that's all there is to it. And the stamp is basically, it's off the paper. Now, like I said, the stamp itself is going to keep the adhesive on it, and we're going to get to that next. Just getting us some paper towels here, because as you can see, it's actually stuck to the tongs. Now this outline here is actually where the stamp was actually oversaturated from the spray, and it will dry out. So that's something you don't have to worry about. So what you would end up doing is just waiting for this stamp to completely dry until the whole back is white again. And it doesn't take too long. And once that happens, I'll be right back to show you the next step in the process. But actually, in the meantime, what I can do is I've got a book here with some other stamps in it, older stamps. But basically, I just want to give you an idea of what you can do with stamps after you've removed them from their paper and you're ready to put them into a stamp album. There's so many different types of stamp albums available. Some you use stamp hinges. I don't really recommend that, because again, you're sticking something on the stamp. What you want to do is try to keep everything off the stamp once you've removed the stamp from the paper. Anything that you put on afterwards, you're just asking for the chance of additional damage in the future. So like I showed you before, you have this option. The only problem with this, you can maybe only fit 1, 2, or 3 stamps in here. You can put like a catalog number on the top. Now every stamp has a catalog number known as a Scott number. So if you were to look up like a value of a stamp, it would be based on the Scott number. Now most sellers of stamps will use the Scott number in order to identify what it is that they are selling. What I recommend everybody do, since not everyone will have like a stamp album, or not an album, but a catalog with values in it and all the different pictures and everything, because you'd be surprised how expensive some of those price guides actually are. The Scott catalogs, it comes in multiple volumes, and it can easily get up to $300, possibly even more. I think the last time I looked, so that they're very expensive. If you have the money, it's a great reference. But as new stamps come out, you have a catalog that doesn't show you those stamps. What I actually like to do, and I'm gonna move the camera here to show you. I actually just, I go online to Mystic Stamp Company. You don't necessarily have to buy from them, but they do a very good job showing, some of the newer stamps, and they do show the Scott catalog numbers also. So to kind of give you an idea, you can click on U.S. stamps, and it kind of gives you some of the basic bestsellers on the first page. What I usually do is I'll go over to here on the left, and where it says U.S. stamps 1 to 5,338, those are actually Scott catalog numbers. So if you were to click on that, it's going to bring you to the first page, and basically it's going to show you, the first Scott number, number 1, the first stamp of the United States from 1847. It's also going to give you some different values, and you could click on these individual, stamps, and it will break down, what you're getting for those prices. Some will be used, some will be unused, some may have defects, but used or unused or tears, and that all plays into the value of a stamp. But what I like to use their website for is I'll go to some of the latest stamps, which you're more likely to see in your the mail that gets delivered to your house or maybe to your business. If you're somebody that's younger, you might have a parent that works at a place that receives a lot of mail, and if you can get in good with the person that gets the mail every day, maybe they'll be nice enough to save the envelopes with the stamps on them for you, and you'll be surprised how many you can accumulate over time. One other option is you can go on to eBay, and there's dealers that actually will sell mixtures of stamps. Sometimes they sell them by the pound. Other times they'll sell them in like an assortment or a grouping, such as this one here, where it's stamps from 2010, all the commemorative stamps. But as you can see, it can get pretty pricey, $55 to $145. So there's no point in spending that much if a majority of these you can get just on regular U.S. mail deliveries. But like I said, on this particular website, what I usually do, I'll go down to the bottom here, where it says the page number, and I'll go to the last page and work my way backwards. And this will give me, some of the most recent issues. And like I said, these are the Hot Wheels stamps that I was showing you earlier. There's 10 different ones. Then they have the Christmas stamps, and they all have different numbers. 5330 is the Scott catalog number. 5331 is also the Scott catalog number. And then as you can see, some of these are different. Christmas stamps, different designs on them. They have Kwanzaa, Hanukkah. When you get there, you can actually go backwards. We'll go one page back. This here is kind of like somewhat of a commemorative flag stamp, because it's, they're commemorating the Flag Act. Then you have some stamps here that are actually scratch and sniff, which is pretty interesting. And it actually smells like the different ice creams that you see on the stamps. And same thing, they all have Scott catalog numbers. And so here's some of the higher denomination stamps. And you get the Scooby-Doo stamps. So it just kind of makes it nice because it's right on the internet. Everybody has access to the internet, and you just go on their website, and you can look at pictures of stamps from the first one all the way to pretty much the current issues, and also get the Scott catalog numbers, so how to categorize that in your collection. Just like the Hot Wheels stamps, they range from 5,321 to 5,330. Those are the the Scott catalog numbers. So that's what I like to use this website for. They do offer a catalog that they will send you in the mail. The catalog is great. The only catch to it is they will send you stamps also with it to look at on approval. And then if you want to buy them, you would send a payment in, and if not, then you'd have to send the stamps back. And it can easily get out of hand. So if it's something that sounds like you'd be interested in doing, then definitely check it out. When I was younger, I actually bought a lot of stamps from Mystic Stamp Company. But it was before we had the internet, so the only way you could find stamps that you needed for your collection is you'd have to get them either through a company like this, or you'd have to go to a store that sold usually coins, and they would do stamps also. So that's something to think about. But I tend to use Mystic Stamp Company's website nowadays just for reference. It's a great website for reference, because they break everything down into different years, and they give you pictures of all the different stamps, and even on some of them they give you a little bit of a like history background. So I went over some of the things. You got different things you can put your stamps in. My personal preference are these special pages, which are they're similar to to give you a kind of a look like this, because they have the black background, and basically it's the same thing. These all have like little clear see-through strips, and the stamps sit in the inside of it, and then they just kind of stay in place. And what I usually do is I'll get the Scott catalog number, print it out on a printer, cut it out, and then I know that all these stamps in this particular row are from Scott number 306. And that's one way to to, keep track of what you have, and some of the other stamps here. One of the other options that you have, which I've done, is you have stamps that tend to look a lot alike, but they end up having slightly different color variations, or watermarks, or there's always something that might throw it off, especially on the older stamps. Also the amount of perforations that a stamp may have. In a case like that, where it gets a little bit trickier, and the stamps are a little less common, I'll do the same thing where I'll print the Scott number, and then I'll also print with it the description of the stamp, and then I'll also print out a picture of the stamp, because you don't always have every stamp. Like in this particular book, which I haven't really messed around with in a while, you can see over here, I don't have these stamps, in the book yet, but at least I have a spot for them, and I know what belongs there because I have a visual image. And I just printed them on a color printer, so it's easy to use for identification quickly. You can kind of go through the pages and see what you have and what you need, and obviously you can see which one you have a lot of and which one you only have a couple of, and that can that information can be used to maybe work out a trade, or figure out if what you have to sell, to raise some money for some of the stamps that you don't have. So this here's what I use for stamps, and depending on how many stamps you have and how big of a collection you want to collect, you can get to the point where, like I'm at, where I have the newer stamps where I'll have one full sheet, front and back, just for one stamp, because I may have 100 of those stamps, so I'll have them nicely displayed on the front and back side of the sheet, and then the next sheet will be the next Scott catalog number. And if you get more stamps, it's just a regular 3-ring binder. You can get another sheet, stick the sheet in, and you don't have to move anything around, to start a second sheet of the same stamp. So that's something to take into consideration. The pages, they can get a little expensive over time. So if it's stamp collecting is something you want to get into and you want to do it long term, this is what I recommend, because the stamps will stay nice and clean, flat. They're not being contaminated by stamp hinges or anything else that you would normally use for a in a stamp album. This is considered like a stock book, because these pages are designed to keep your extras. So it's kind of like your extra stock. But I actually like collecting them in this type of way, because they just look better, especially when you have a decent amount of a certain stamp. Let me see if I got some other pages here I could show you of something interesting. So to give you an idea, if you got a lot of one particular type of stamp, you can load them up in there pretty good, and they're they don't go anywhere, which is nice. And they have these pages where they're designed for larger stamps, so you may not have as many rows on one sheet, but they'll still fit in the same way. So these particular pages here are 8 rows. I actually most of the time I tend to use the 7-row pages. 8 rows is kind of pushing it a little bit, because the stamps are right on the edge of, their protective sleeve. So, like I said, normally I would use them on, the ones that are on, 7 rows per sheet. But like I said, this is just happens to be, one of my books kind of kicking around that I had put together many years ago. At this point, I have, a ton more that I could add to and do it, the right way. And they come in all different types of books. Some books actually have the pages, part of the book itself, and this just happens to be one of them. And let's see the way these kind of work. Same idea. The only difference is, they're just not as pretty. They have these protective type sheets in between the sheets, and then you have to kind of get that out of the way, and then you see your stamp. But as you can see, the stamp is partially exposed, and that's why you have that divider sheet between the sheets, so you don't have stamps sticking on top of other stamps. But I use the same idea where I, print out the stamp catalog number and the visual picture, and it's just a nice way to display them. But the other pages are definitely the way to go. I just happen to use this book because I just must have had it at that one particular time. Alright, so let's take a look at this stamp here. It's almost dry. Now, it's very sticky. I can stick my thumb on it and it's not going nowhere. So, the same glue that was on there that you use to stick it on your envelope is, it's the same thing. So, once it's pretty dry, you might see a little bit of remnants of the spray. It's, not the worst thing in the world. Now, what you end up doing with this is you get some baby powder. Now, I recommend trying to get some baby powder that's non-scented. Otherwise, your stamp collection is going to smell like baby powder, and if you like that, that's fine, but I don't recommend it because a stamp collection is not supposed to smell like baby powder. And what you would do with the stamp is basically you're going to just put it in the baby powder, and what that does is the baby powder sticks to the adhesive. Alright, and be careful not to damage the stamp while doing this, but you're gonna, kind of move it around a little bit, just so, the back side, has a decent amount of powder on it. Just kind of flick off the extra, and, feel it from the center out. You don't want to go from the edges in because you don't want to damage the perforations. And all you're going to do is just kind of, just make sure that it's got, good coverage everywhere. If you do it too soon before a stamp is completely dry, that's going to, cause the powder to get kind of gooey. So you want to make sure it's, pretty dry before you do this step. And that's pretty much it. The only problem with this process is, it's baby powder. It kind of can go everywhere. So it's, it's on the back side of the stamp. It can also get on the front side. So like I said, just going from the center of the stamp out, just to get the excess, powder off. And then, obviously the stamp tongs are going to be full of powder, so you're going to want to just get that extra powder off of there. And then, like I was showing you before, you know, you can get something like this. Like I said, this is just like the those pages I was showing you. The only difference is, you know, this is upside down. That's why I'm having a problem. So, you know, same thing. You can open this up. You grab your stamp. Put the stamp in. And there it is, you know, self-adhesive stamp, you know, removed from the paper, and looks perfect. You know, like I said, it's you know, it looks, you know, better than, you know, putting a stamp like this in there, you know, just to kind of give you an idea. Let's see if I get scissors here. Just excuse me for 1 second while I cut this. You know, even if you cut somewhat close to the perforations, the last thing you want to do is damage the stamp while trimming it off an envelope. But if you do somewhat fairly close, and you know, you can put that in there. And if you look real close, let's see if we get this to focus. You know, you can see the perforations on the paper still, but they just don't have that contrast. They don't have that pop. And that's a white stamp on a black background. Now, this stamp here, being a darker stamp, you know, doesn't show up well, but it still shows up very well compared to the one that's still on the paper. Alright, so if you have any questions about this process, you know, definitely, you know, leave me a message in the comments. I try to get back to everybody that you know, leave me a message in the comments, or you can email me directly also. And if you like this video, definitely you know, hit the thumbs up, like the video. If you have a stamp collector in the family or a friend, share the video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I suggest subscribing to the channel. You know, I'll give you a lot of different collecting tips that have to do with stamp collecting, coins, comic books, baseball cards, non-sports cards, a little bit of everything. And, you know, we'll be doing a bunch of different stamp collecting videos, but, you know, this is probably the number one question most stamp collectors you know, have. You know, they're not sure how to go about getting these newer stamps off these envelopes, because you can't soak these off in water. They're not designed to soak off in water, and that was one of the reasons why they made the change, was so, you know, people couldn't soak them off on water and then try to reuse the stamps if they weren't, you know, if they didn't have a cancellation on them. But with certain types of chemicals, you know, they can be removed. So it wasn't a perfect success on their part, but, you know, stamp collectors, you know, should have been thought about it, you know, at the same time during their thought process. So like I said, you know, this is the best way that I recommend. Like I said, there's other ways of doing it, other chemicals, but they're pretty harsh, and the chemicals on some of the stamps will cause the ink on the stamps to kind of bleed and run. Doing it this way is the only way that I've come across over the years that you don't run into that problem. You don't damage the stamp, and you know, overall it just looks good. You know, it looks a lot better than, you know, just trimming it close to the perforations and leaving it on the paper. Alright, so like I said, if you have any questions, leave comments below, and I'll get back to everybody as quickly as I can. Thanks for spending some time with me, and I'll see you soon.